Thank you, Anastasia. There's almost nothing I could do or say that's going to synthesize, the last however many hours, it's, 27 hours, 28 hours in any really productive way. But let me just make a few comments. Let me pick up on some of the themes that Les nicely teed up. One of the things we could have done for a meeting like this, especially at this stage in the strategic planning process, is we could have done it really easily. We could have invited a bunch of people, a lot of the folks that we've heard a lot from, sort of the usual suspects, and then we probably could have gone through those themes that have been developing over the intervening year or so, and we could have gotten sort of strong validation to bold a few words and not to poke and prod us or to build out from them. That would have been easy. We actually didn't do that, as Les sort of pointed out. There was a lot of people that we brought to this meeting that if we're not hearing from for the first time, it's just people we don't necessarily hear from a lot at these kinds of things. Some of the usual suspects, there were just a few of them. We put them all in the back row. Yeah, there they are, if you notice. I actually had nothing to do with it, but I think it made total sense to put that back row together and keep them back there. I think what ended up happening is exactly what Les just said, is that instead of making it easy for us, it actually made it quite stimulating and overwhelming. And it overwhelming in multiple dimensions. It's overwhelming because, some of the great ideas we heard, which actually I thought very nicely hung off of the major themes that had come out. So it wasn't like we had completely missed the boat on the themes. It's just you realize that when you start to unpack these themes, you deal with a lot of complexity of this. The issues are complicated. The systems are complicated. And even as a funder, even the ecosystem of NIH, it's very complicated. And as we were joking, if we were really going to be able to do everything that was even suggested, we wouldn't have the person power. We wouldn't even come close to having the resources. But that doesn't mean we don't have the leadership. And that's, I think, what you heard a lot from, and you saw a lot of NHGRI staff playing various roles here. I actually played a very minor, almost non-existent role deliberately, and even our division directors were here only as participants. What you heard as moderators and as session leaders and so forth were a lot of the rest of the staff of NHGRI, not only from the extramural program, but other parts of the Institute as well. So we can provide that. Now we have to take your input and strategize and synthesize. Some of this will conveniently tuck into the written document of the strategic plan, but one of the things this workshop did, maybe not surprisingly, is I certainly heard a lot of ideas that were more on the implementation side than the visioning side. It gives us a pearl of vision, but the hard part, the wording might be a good sentence here. The hard part is, all right, now how do you actually execute on that? And so that's what we're going to, we have lots of notes that were taken, and that's what we're going to have to follow. But we're not talking about one-year problems here. We're talking about long-term problems. Some of the things that came up are solvable even a handful of years. Some of it's going to take decades, and some of it's going to be very challenging, but we should still keep our eye on the ball. So maybe what I would say is thank you, first of all, to all the participants. You come here, some travel further than others. We don't treat you that well. We readily admit that. Sometimes I joke about how we bring you to, not such nice windowless conference rooms and mediocre hotels in the Bethesda area. At least this space a little bit nicer. We gave you windows, and then because we were videoing, it's the first thing we do is we cover the windows so you can sense there's beautiful sunlight out there, but you're not really taking much of it in. But at least it's not a windowless conference room. It's just we've practically painted over the window so you can't see out. But thank you for your energies. We actually have people to thank remotely. This time we were getting lots of people coming in remotely and even giving us questions. So thanks to all the participants. But really what I also want to do is thank many people who were quite involved in putting an event like this together. I'll start with Anastasia and Les because they led the folks. There's going to be a lot of people to thank. Hold your applause to the end, really. They've been leading this internal group and then they're going to immediately tell me, well, you have to thank Jyoti because Jyoti did a tremendous amount of heavy, as she did. They're going to also tell me you have to immediately thank their internal group of people that have been working along with these themes and so forth, and many of them are represented here. And they're right, they deserve to be thanked. They're going to also say, you know, immediately thank everybody else, program analysts who are taking notes, various other people who have been moderators. This is just part of NHGRI. We just have lots of people who step up and are extremely helpful to this. And so I absolutely thank all of them. I also want to thank our video crew and our communications crew. We make the strategic planning process as transparent as we possibly can. This room is only so big. Funds only allow us traveling so many people in. That's why we video cast this live. It's working. People are watching. People are engaged. And people, trust me, people will watch this afterwards. A lot of people will watch this afterwards. And I'll be traveling to some other part of the world 6 months from now, and they say, oh, wow, I actually watched on YouTube that workshop you had about genomic, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, I constantly bump into people. So that's not easy to get all this infrastructure set up. So thanks to my video crew and my communications crew. And anything else that any of my other leadership or anyone involved can tell me I should mention or thank. Otherwise, let me tell you just a couple things about what's next. Well, the first what's next is to take, you know, the 250 pages of notes that have been taken, synthesize it, and this will be a living document, so we'll be looking at this probably for years to come. On a very practical note, if you go back to an early slide that Terry Manolio showed early in terms of, it wasn't that, it was only 27 or 8 hours ago, but it seemed like a long time ago, which was sort of out of our slide deck of the strategic planning process. We are quite advanced in the process from the point of view of being well past the halfway point. This was a workshop that was basically hung off of some mature themes that have been developed, and some of which have even been, you know, kicked around, including by some of our advisory groups. So it's actually why I think they survived pretty well. You built on top of them. You didn't sort of bash them at their core, and that didn't necessarily surprise me because I knew that they were good going in because we've gotten a lot of feedback already. Just so if you're interested to know where we are in this process, we literally are now about a month away from really starting to outline the document, and there'll be one strategic plan published. Now, there may be other documents, there might be other things that either get written or get posted on what, blah, blah. So you can imagine when we publish a strategic plan, you know, we'd like to publish it in very high profile journal, and so we can't, it's not like we get 50, 60, 80 pages, so it has to be quite concise and to the point. So that requires some very strategic writing to take what could be hundreds and hundreds of pages of good ideas and get them down. So we are about to enter sort of an outlining phase, and from then we will be writing sort of starting, I'm going to imagine, as we enter the winter, because by the spring we want to have a rough draft of this thing. And so there will be a rough draft that'll be produced in about April, and there will be a revision of that that'll be sort of ready to be published over the summer. It'll be readied over the summer so that it'll be published in October of next year. So literally it's like 1 year and 2 or 3 weeks from now is when this thing will be published. You can back it up from a publishing schedule, otherwise we really have to have it pretty much worked out and all refined and ready to go to press by the summer, or certainly by the late summer. So that's where we are. This feeds in beautifully, because now I can turn to these two and say, help work through those themes you had, refine them so we can wrap them up into the evolving outline. When you actually see the outline, some of the themes that you guys have been hammering, especially in the last hour, will feed in very nicely to the outline, because some of these things that sort of are themes that sort of cutting across the issues around diversity, issues around equity, issues around disparity, will feed in very nicely to some of the major overarching themes and values and stuff that we're going to articulate. So I actually felt very comfortable hearing this discussion because it will feed in really well to what is a very nascent outline. And so I think you'll be pleased when you eventually see that. But the timing's great. These guys will take this and sort of help get many of the things represented here into the outline, and then off we go to try to put the document together. So let me just pause for a minute and ask, does anybody have any questions for me from sort of at a very high level with respect to the strategic planning process and how this and all of your comments feed into any of these things?
Will there be a final meeting as there was with the last strategic planning round?
Yes, there will be. And it will be openly, video cast. It'll be in April. And once again, as always, we will have, unfortunate limits to the number of people that can fit in the room, and we will bend over backwards to be able to have as many people join remotely, have documents available on the web, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I probably just should have said that. Yeah. please.
I had a question. So, so it sounds like other parts of NIH will be involved in implementing parts of this plan, or so how does the information get to other institutes, and then what does that process look like?
Yeah, so wow, there's a lot of different ways I can answer that. Let me go back, since I know the slides. I wasn't able to be here. I know the slides that Terry presented because they're slides I look at frequently. You know, is just a reminder of this phase change that we're in the middle of. I only have to go back 16 years, and we're funding 90% of genomics research. I go back 10 year, 8 year, I'm funding 50%, and now I'm funding about 10%. So what that, so really it says a lot about what is our role compared to the rest of NIH. And we've sort of summarized our role in this new mantra, the forefront of genomics. So this is, to me, it's all about sort of taking responsibility and leadership for showing the way when it comes to genomics. Now, obviously I can say that. That doesn't mean I can go to the other institutes and tell them what to do, but actually what I actually find, and we find, and I point to especially my division directors, because we spend a lot of time going around in small groups talking to the other institutes. They are very eager to interact and to be helped. They see the power of genomics for doing the things that they are interested in doing at a very basic level, translational level, implementation level for their disease areas, but they also recognize that this is all moving so fast and the kind of issues you are all talking about are so complicated, they can't do this alone. And so, what I will tell you is it's done in sort of, pairwise interactions in a lot of ways, sometimes through formal collaborations, sometimes through a little bit of just, helping them, hand-holding, or just advising them. Every single one of my program directors, in addition to division directors, I'm thinking about even the program directors who you've met here, they spend hours and hours and hours of time, probably every month, on phone calls or going to other meetings. There's an amazing amount of interaction. So a lot of it happens that way. A lot of it happens then when you wrap things up into big programs at NIH. All of us keeps getting mentioned. Trust me, we are not funding all of us, but we are interacting constantly with all of us around the areas of expertise we can help them with. Similarly, if you look at common fund projects, we play a lot of major roles in common fund projects. And so one of the roles we can play is to try to identify what needs to be done in any of this space. We're just talking about genomic medicine implementation here. Early in the week, there was another meeting. Some of you actually were at that. There was something called an International Common Disease Alliance, which is trying to develop sort of international approach to tackle understanding the genomic and other bases of common disease. And in all of these things, one of our roles, all these issues, that meeting, this meeting, so much bigger than us. But what our role can be is to try to help coordinate, map, educate, and so there's a lot of effort to try to get other institutes understanding what that alliance is going to be doing, and then thinking about what needs to be done. So it's not a simple answer. It's a big part of my collective leadership's job. But I think people are very receptive because they see these exciting opportunities, but they also see these incredible challenges. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah. Dan?
I'm going to try to be optimistic for a second, so this is going to be hard for me. But I'm thinking maybe it's 2027 or 2028, and we've actually accomplished stuff that we've set out to do at 2020. So my chess question to you is, what's next?
I'm sorry. You're talking about the next strategic plan? Wow. Yeah, so I got to tell you, I just got to wait to at least get this one published, and then maybe we could have that conversation with a bottle of wine. But here's one thing I would say. Is that anything I would try to articulate now, I think I would be embarrassed about by about 2025. Because I think I would have it so wrong. Because that is that just seems like a very far reach. Let me just tell you, maybe I'll just make this comment. I guess I'm going to be on video, so I got to be really careful. But because this is really relevant. This is so relevant for this workshop. So relevant for this workshop more than any other workshop we've done in strategic planning this time, is what I'm about to tell you. Is that in 2011, when we published our strategic plan, I had been director of the Institute only for about a year and a half. I wasn't even director for 2 years, only for about a year and a half. And it had the word genomic medicine in the title, as the slide emphasizes. And there were people, some of them may be watching right now, who were overwhelmingly critical of me personally because I was leading, as the new director of the Institute, too aggressive. That genomic medicine being talked about in 2011, being ready, even being, it was just was going too fast, too furious, and this was going to just crash. I would argue that based on what we heard at this meeting in the last 28 hours, have proved those critics wrong. And it's 8 years later, something like that. So the idea, so back then, with that strategic plan, I was just trying to keep my job. I thought some people wanted to take me down. Now you're telling me what's things going to be like in 2028. I guess I want to first hear what the criticism is of our 2020 plan, and then I'll try to think it through. Yeah, Mark.
I think that's a really provocative comment, there are three things that I would synthesize here. One is the funding curve that you showed us and you referenced. The second is Dan's comment, and the third is that people are saying, well, we need to get to a point where it's not genomic medicine, it's medicine. So with those three things, would a metric of success for this strategic plan be that the NHGRI is not necessary to do another strategic plan?
Yeah, no, I think, sometimes we joked about that when we were sort of going through our visioning process that led to the forefront of genomics, is that at some point in time, are things so disseminated and working so well that there almost isn't a forefront. And, maybe maybe that's our ultimate success, is to make us irrelevant. Now, that said, in the last, day and a half, the number of really hard issues that you folks raise it doesn't leave me much belief that we're going to be completely irrelevant by 2020, maybe by 2038 or so, I don't know. But it is an interesting notion. But there's a side of me that says if we really are that successful in solving all the problems that just got laid out in the past day and a half, maybe it is time that we would go away. But I just don't think that's happening anytime soon. So I'm not gonna worry about that. Any other questions? And we're okay on time. Nobody ever minds being released 20 minutes early, especially when we can actually raise the blinds. You can see how beautiful it is outside. So thank you all again very much for coming. Continue to follow us and give us input as we march along in this process. And most importantly, safe travels back and have a great weekend. Thank you all.